Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Enrichment on the Go. And I have my wonderful guest with me today, Dr. Sharla Walker. And today we're going to be talking about advice for new parents. I love this topic. I love to assist parents with their, I call it a whole journey in regards to parenthood and the importance of starting out just trying to start out the best. I don't know any parent that doesn't want to be the best parent that they can absolutely be. And sometimes as parents or just people, we need information in order to be all that we can be, right? We need advice. And so welcome, Dr. Sharla.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such an honor and a privilege because we get to put together the tag team, right? So we have early childhood development and the pediatrician. So y'all are really the unsung superheroes of the work that we do in the pediatric space. And so this is awesome to be able to come on and collaborate with you in this way. We need to do more of this.
I really appreciate you saying that. And it just really is important. And I always, we all work together as a unit, right?
Yep.
The parents, the provider, or the center, or the teacher, and the pediatrician, your doctor, is very important to your child's development. And so I'm very excited to bring this piece to new parents. So let's talk, or if you've been thinking about having a child, right?
Yes.
You need to know.
Yes.
So let's dive in.
Yes.
So, vaccinations.
Mm-hmm.
I know this has been a hot topic for quite some time.
Hold on. It is the plight.
So tell me just talk to us about vaccinations and what they mean for a child's development.
So in regards to, health and development, vaccinations are very important for our little ones, right? I always give the analogy to my parents that vaccines are like seatbelts. So you would never put your baby in the car without having them properly, strapped in and making sure that they're safe. And so as we go out into the world, we want to make sure that our little ones are safe. Now, there's a lot of hesitancy, and rightfully so, right? In regards to especially minorities like African Americans, Hispanic, Latinos, with the healthcare system in us, we have a really, really shady past with healthcare. So with things like the Tuskegee experiment, Henrietta Lacks. And so there is this level of distrust, right, that we have. And so I always explain to my parents, like, look, we do, for the most part, right? Because there's always somebody somewhere that's going to outdo, that don't have the right heart. But, especially us that deal in pediatrics, we absolutely love what we do. Everything that we give in terms of vaccinations. So your, DTaP, like all of these things are critical. They're the seatbelt, right? And so it's really, really important that we get our vaccines. We do so on schedule. And any questions that you have, there's a couple different tools that I always point my parents to, and a couple things that I want you to know. We schedule vaccines. There's so much in the behind the scenes that parents don't see when we talk about vaccinations. So there's the American Academy, or the American group of immunization practices. They're called ACIP. So they sit down and we schedule out and talk, this is what's needed at this age based on diseases that we see. So at 6 months, your baby gets what's called a Hib vaccine, and Hib protects from upper respiratory infections and ear infections. That's important for kids that age, right? But if you come in at 16 and we're doing a shot catch up, you don't necessarily need a Hib. You've been exposed, and so there's age requirements and all of these different facets that go into it. And then everything that we give, we have to scan them, write down the lot number, expiration number, who gave it, where you gave it to. So there's a lot of safety precautions in the background. One thing that I've gotten a lot too, which is a very valid question, is that I've heard parents ask, like, well, I heard that if my baby has one type of insurance, they get a certain vaccine. If they get another type of insurance, they have, there's a different vaccine that they get. And so that is not, it's true, but it's not, in terms of, it's almost like brand name generic, right? So if you have Medicaid insurance, the government gives the vaccines freely. And so there's a certain pool, because they instead of charging you, we charge the government. We pull it out of that refrigerator, but not anything that it's lesser quality or anything like that.
So when we talk about the disparities in our communities, in African American communities, and even regarding the Hispanic community, I know that this has been a very, especially, a lot of younger parents are more aware of some things that are going on. But I don't want you all to use Google as your your guide. What I would like for you to do, because there are, if some parents, I've had parents in my program, their children haven't had any of the vaccines. And I'm going to speak as myself as a parent. Some of the vaccines that my children didn't need, or I felt they didn't need, they didn't get. And I think it's okay as a parent, because you're your child's first advocate. I always tell my families, I always tell my parents, you're the child's first advocate. However, you need to ask the proper questions. So, there are some vaccines that come, almost like a cocktail, where it's like 3 in 1.
Yes.
And so I was very mindful of that. I'm not trying to sway any parent anyway, but I was very mindful that I broke out the vaccinations, and I had to ask the pediatrician, because all of them came. Most of the time they do a 3 in 1, but I asked that the shots be broken out.
And
because we have seen some things kind of transpire, even within the African American community. I can remember when autism wasn't spoken of in our community. And now it's more so and more prevalent within African American and mostly male children. And so I really just want to talk to that. If you're not going to get your child vaccinated, you still have to turn the forms into the school or to the center that they're going to. And it's a form, it's a health inventory form that every center needs by the authority of licensing. All right. And so we're going to ask for that. We can't not have it on file. But can you talk about the importance that if the child or the parent decides that they don't want to get the child vaccinated, that it's still important for them to come in for screenings. And let's talk about the screenings. And also, you still need to make sure that your child is getting a multivitamin, the right nutrients in their body. So can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So even a couple things. So one, anytime I have a parent who has a hesitancy, we are on the same team, right? So me as a pediatric provider, I want to respect your wishes. And my goal is always to educate. You're going to make whatever decision because you're the parent, but I don't ever want my parents to make decisions based out of fear or things that may not be, or, something they read on Facebook. Like, that's okay, girl. Like, let's talk. If you're going to make the decision, stand firm in the decision with the right information. So I never ever shame parents. We have so many things. I've had parents that come in and they may decline a certain immunization, and I'll say, okay, tell me a little bit about, what your hesitancy with that. I want to understand better so I can make sure that you have all the education. And can I give you what's called a VIS? So a VIS is called a vaccine information sheet. You should be getting them with every single immunization that your baby gets. So if you're at a facility where I've
never gotten one, I'm going to talk to my pediatrician.
Yes, you should get a VIS. So every time we give immunizations, we give you a VIS. We want you to know there's no secrets, right? Like, we want you to know what your baby is getting. Also, we have what's called the VIR system. And so you can go to the CDC, so the Center for Disease Control. That's who regulates all the things, right? They tell you not to eat the lettuce. They tell you to get shots, right? Like, so they are in charge of this, but there's a system called the VIR system. And the VIR system is a public system, and it's the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, VIRS. And so when we do have an issue, no matter what, whatever it may be. So when I give my vaccines are like seatbelt talks, right? It's okay. Now we make the seatbelts are made to protect safety, right? Like that, the intention is good. Do things happen sometimes with seatbelts? Yes. Does that mean that everybody should stop wearing seatbelts? No, we may need to make some modifications depending on, on what's going on. So even with you, Miss Tanya, doing the combination vaccines, which we have two or three. And really that's more so just because we don't want to be traumatic with the kid, right? So at the 2-month, we have what's called a pediatrics, and that has their DTaP, their Hep B, and their polio. But I always, even because at 2 months and 4 months, you get the same exact vaccines come in a series, etc. So I always get the same talk where I say, we're doing pediatrics. That's the combination that has this, and this. Now, parents absolutely can ask to break them up, and, and we do individual, and it's really whatever you're most comfortable with. Right.
Absolutely.
Yep. So it's that one. And then, the Kenrix, which is the DTaP and polio, which is the booster that we give at 4, and then the ProQuad is it has MMRV and MMRV, so measles, mumps, rubella, varicella. Also, too, part of the reason that we've been able to screen or to do better in terms of, and we're seeing more of an influx of autism, is a couple things. One, I'm very, very sensitive to the topic too, because I have a sister who's on the autism spectrum. And so I tell people all the time, I get it. Autism is real. My sister has autism. I'm an autism caregiver. So I absolutely get it. Two, we do a lot. We have a lot more screening tools. And so instead of, back in the day where something quite ain't right with that boy, we can't really put our finger on it, we're able to now put a name to it. So I think in combination with a couple other different things, that we do a better job when you come into that screening at 9 months, 18 months, 24 months. We're screening. We have paperwork that we have you to do to fill out. And we go over their risk for autism, right? Because even if you're not vaccinating, and this is so important, we still need to see you. We still want to lay eyes on your baby.
That goes into the screening part that we're talking about. It's very important that you bring your child in for the screenings, the visual, the hearing. All of that is a part of their development.
Yes. And even too, I had a little baby. There's a almost think of like a stiff neck, and there is a muscle spasm that babies can get called torticollis. And so it usually happens around 9 months. And I had a little baby that every time I saw her head kind of tilted to the side a little bit. Right. And I hadn't seen her in a couple of months. I think we had missed the 6-month appointment, but I got mommy to come in for the 9-month. And so in her sitting there holding her, she was still just kind of looking at me with her head tilted. And I was like, is she always like that? And so mom's like, actually, mom pulls up pictures, and she's like, actually, yeah, I never noticed it, right? And the baby ended up having what's called torticollis, which is just kind of like this neck stiffness. And so we're able to send her to physical therapy, and they can do what they need to do, so her head isn't, stuck to one side and misshapen. And so even things like that, when we come in for a well child check, a lot of times it's, we are very focused on the vaccines, but there's so much more that goes on that, you may not even understand that we're doing. So when we take that height and that weight, we're looking at your baby's growth curve. We want to make sure that they're in the right percentiles, that their height, their weight, their head circumference are meeting the appropriate benchmarks. We want to make sure that they're eating well. We want to make sure that you don't have any questions, right? That you're like, oh, we'll get that one thing checked out, because that one thing could be something really big.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's very important, parents, for you. We're actually in the middle of parent-teacher conferences, and, for even young children. Yeah. And one of my parents said to me today, they said, wow, this is amazing, because normally you don't see parent-teacher conferences until they're in elementary school and, middle and high. But it's very important for us to connect with the parents, because, and from your perspective, if we see something, we're not the professional in regards to being a doctor. So we are making observations in the centers. The teachers should be making observations. They should be doing assessments to see and make sure that your child is on target or task, just like Dr. Sharla mentioned, in regards to their development. So if we see a red flag, right? Yes. And I want you to know, parents, one thing I tell my parents, especially when I am interviewing and things of that nature, I tell them that we're going to do developmental screenings, and it's not a bad thing, right?
Yes.
I think sometimes it's like, oh, what is this? It's a developmental screening, which means that we are looking for certain things because we want to be proactive and not reactive. And that's what even the vaccinations and the screenings, because if you're proactive, you can catch a lot of things before it gets to a certain degree, right?
Yes.
And so it's easier. It's just like parents, if you had a clogged artery, but you don't deal with it, right? Or you don't do anything to cleanse your body or whatever it may be, it grows into this bigger problem or issue that now it can still be done, but it's going to take a much longer time. And so it's the same way with your child in regards to their development and the vaccinations and the screenings. If we can catch that they have a hearing problem early, and they may need tubes in the ears, if we can see that they have a vision problem, or even that hearing problem could be something going on with their language. If we can connect the dots, it's also that we can find out because it's not about the physician, it's not about the caregiver, it's not about just the parent, it's about the child. And what is the need of the child at this moment? And I really try to hone in on that, because we have to, as advice for new parents, I really try to tell my parents all the time, it's okay. It's okay.
Yes. And that's such a good point too, right? So I always tell, especially when I used to work NICU and things like that, but I'm always like, look, even if we don't have to agree, right? But I respect that this is your baby. And when they come into this office, they're my baby too, right? So we are on the same team. I have kids. I get birthday pictures and all kinds of stuff. Like, these are also my kids, right? Like, so whatever, and you're my partner in this, right? And even our early childhood specialists, you're our partner in this, because you see them 5 days a week. I see them every couple months. If they have something going on, I may see them more frequently, right? So you see them every day. So if you notice something, I've had plenty of times where the mom's like, yeah, daycare said they're not, they're not up to par in their speech, and they want me to bring them in. Right. And so you're then able to use your expertise to then, and so it's a multidisciplinary team that this child has to make sure that they have all the tools to succeed. And so it's not about ego. It's not about, well, what I said is right. It's about us working together to make sure that this child thrives and they have all the tools that they need for success. Right. So even if, even with the vaccinations, I always tell my parents, okay, well, I hear you. Let me know if you decide to change your mind. Let me give you some research and make sure that you're still, and I always tell them, even if you weren't vaccinated, this is the same information that I give. I want you to make sure they're washing their hands, they're doing a multivitamin, doing their vitamin C, eating good diet. Okay. Now you can't tell me, child, like, you can't be out here feeding baby McDonald's every other day talking about you don't know what's in my vaccine. You don't know what's in that McDonald's either. Right. So we need to keep that same healthy energy all the way around, of making sure that we're putting that everything. If we're going to be, if you feel cautious about what you're putting in their body as far as vaccines, I can respect that. But also McDonald's. Now we got to make it make sense. We can't be feeding hot Cheetos to babies, to 1-year-olds. Like, no. It's all of it has to work together so they can live well.
I think that's great advice, especially with the diet. I've seen, and I'm just going to briefly talk. I've seen a 5-year-old come into my program with Starbucks coffee. I've seen, a cupcake in the morning. But my advice for new parents is that you want to make sure that your child has a healthy diet. I've seen them come in with, a donut at 2. And a donut for a 2-year-old is not good diet. And they are going to think about what sugar is intended to do.
Yes.
So you have a toddler who is already very, very busy. Yes. And then you add a donut and you drop them off.
Starting them up.
It's like
and
you
then
started the engine
yeah.
and it's going, you're going
Yes.
50 miles an hour at 7 a.m. So I really think.
And then they crash, right? And then they're tired. Because the same way that we crash.
And they're not able to eat the healthy meals that are being presented,
Yes.
nor are they able to engage fully in the activity, circle time, because they are crashing. Yes. And then they're cranky, right?
Yes.
So
yes,
let's talk about breastfeeding. I love this because with my first child, I did not, well, I tried.
This is
That's
my
a whole
jam.
episode. But I did try and it didn't go too well. But on the second time around, I was better prepared. And I absolutely loved it. I think breastfeeding, I love that I have you on here because it helps the mom and it helps the child. So can you talk about
my gosh. Absolutely. Let me tell y'all. Now, listen close. Breastfeeding is amazing. Now, I'm also a certified breastfeeding specialist. Breast is best is always my chime. But also too, because we don't want to shame mommies. There's some mommies who can't breastfeed for whatever reasons. I always say fed is best. Now, we want your baby to be fed in love and for them to have a sane mama. Okay. So that is great. But breastfeeding is so good, especially in our community. So on a couple different levels, one, we have the baby, right? So when babies are breastfed, there's an increased bonding with mom, right? They get all of our antibodies. They're receiving good nutrients. The colostrum, the fat is so good for their brain. And a lot of babes, they're at decreased risk for things like childhood obesity, asthma. And these are all things that medically our community is disparaged by. So we are more likely to be obese, more likely to have asthma, more likely to have ear infections and colds. Breastfeeding can cut down the rate of those things as well. And so on the baby end, it's so good for them. It's so great. And then for mommy, it decreases your risk for breast cancer, decreases your risk for uterine cancer, decreases your risk for, yes, postpartum depression rates are down because you're bonding with your baby. And you get snatched back. Okay. Like you burn your calories and you tighten right again. Okay. Like I'm going to do that. So breastfeeding, it can be challenging though. Right. And so the biggest thing with breastfeeding is making the decision early, having the tools and the support. And so I did an entire a year-long research project where we implemented a breastfeeding program in the clinic that I work in. And there were a lot of different things that I saw, right? And a couple of things that we got to come against, okay? One, breastfeeding is not nasty. And so in our community, yes, because we've over-sexualized breasts in our bodies. Girl, I ain't doing that. That's nasty. Who told you that was nasty? That is literally the way your body is made. Your body produces the milk, right? So to us, because we've allowed the media and other things to over-sexualize our bodies, it's nasty, or there's a negative connotation with it, because even going back to slavery, right? Slaves were forced to, it was called wet feeding. They were forced to breastfeed white babies. And so even with that, it kind of started this shift away from that in our community. And so we have to always, again, honor and respect and acknowledge those things. But when we know better, we do better. Breastfeeding is good for baby, good for mommy. We want to make sure too that you have good support. You want to know that when you go back to work, there are laws. There are laws that protect you. They have to provide you with breaks to pump. They have to provide you somewhere clean, and you're not pumping in a bathroom stall, right? Like those things are not okay.
And the child care center has to provide. We have to provide an area for moms to breastfeed. And so, I believe it's a beautiful gift, and it's free.
Yes. I was like, don't even get me started on the beat. And then on the other hand, right? So just again, like the whole seatbelts discussion, right? We do everything with good intention. Breast milk substitutes, AKA formula, we make them with good intention. We try to make as close, the formula as close as possible. But I get so many babies who come in with reflux issues.
Yeah.
And so let me tell you what reflux can look like, because what I hear most often is, girl, this baby's so spoiled already, I can't never lay him down. And so then I go, okay, are we breast or bottle feeding? What formula are we feeding? Because each of the different formulas, the different colors, I won't go into grave detail, but there's a certain amount of cow's milk protein, right? And I always equate it to like whole milk all the way down to lactate. The one that's cheapest is the standard Enfamil, infant, Similac, Similac. We feed it, but that's cow's milk is for cows. And so babies sometimes will have reflux where they hiccup all the time after their feeds. They get congested. Mommies will come in and say, oh, I think baby is sick. And because they sneeze and they cough and they gag and I can't lay them down. And it's really because that muscle that's on top of his belly that we all have. But that muscle is about as strong and has as much tone as their head and neck. So for most babies, virtually is none. They're little bobbleheads, right? We love them. So you fill up this water balloon essentially where there's acid from his stomach. We put the milk in there, and half of us aren't, we burp them a little bit, lay them down, and all of that comes rushing up.
Let's talk about that. And that was advice I really want to impress upon parents, new parents, is that you allot for the time for your baby to digest their food.
Yes.
Don't give them, they have to drink. Listen to your pediatricians, okay? Because they're supposed to drink maybe an ounce or two, and then you're supposed to burp them. Don't give them the whole bottle because it's too much. It's just as if you were to sit there and stuff your face full of the food, but you never take a break. It's the same thing for them, and you get indigestion. It's no different. And I suggest, I've always done this, but sometimes they say you don't have to warm it. Something warm going down into your digestive system is better for baby and for you. Cold items on a stomach is not easily digested. That's why they'll tell you to have room temperature.
Yes,
make sure it's not cold. I honestly like warm myself. It's especially for babies, because it gives them this time. They allot it, and you stop them, you burp them, and then they keep going. And then, at the end, don't just try to put them down. You have to give 5-10 minutes. But if you're holding them up close to the shoulder and, you're just rubbing their back and burp, if one is warm, they'll naturally kind of go ahead and burp.
Yes,
so I really wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, it's not nice, right? Think of somebody's like, here's your food, and it's freezing. So from the fridge straight into baby's belly is not nice. It sometimes, like with us, it can cause cramping. Don't know, right? But even out of the breast, 98.6. warm, somewhere in there. So even that room temperature is fine, but please don't give babies like straight up cold milk. It's just is not good for their belly. And so if they are hiccuping, belching, you feel like you can't put them down, and so I gotta hold them for them to sleep. It's likely because they have heartburn. And so it's time to come in and have a conversation with us. So we may say, okay, instead of doing Enfamil infant, try the gentle ease. That protein is hydrolyzed a little bit, and so it may be a little bit easier. Try Enfamil AR. The AR, it's a little bit thicker, so it doesn't come up as easily. So that's something that you want to work with your pediatrician about, because it doesn't have to be that way. Mommy comes in, she's tired, you're getting an hour of sleep, you're crying, you're doing everything that you can. Come talk to us, right? There's no such thing as a dumb question, no such thing as a dumb visit. If it is a question and if it is inflicting on your lifestyle, right, come talk to us. At the very least, even if it's not a physiological issue, we're able to give you some guidance and say, okay, let's try this, let's try that. Something, is the baby going to die if we feed the baby Enfamil infant versus the gentle ease? No, but you may be sleep deprived, and we want to make sure that mommy is sleeping well and baby is most comfortable. So it doesn't have to be, oh, they're bleeding, oh, they have a fever. It may be like, girl, for some reason I can't lay this baby down. He gets the hiccups every time he eats. He's extremely fussy. come and talk to us. What I want to also kind of advise too is please do not put anything in baby's bottle before talking to us, right? So everybody, we love our grandmamas and them, but I had a baby who came in.
Don't do it.
Baby came in, he was 2 months old, and this baby legit weighed like 20 pounds, and he was struggling to breathe. That is too much weight for a 2-month-old. And so when I asked the mommy was a teenager, and I said, girl, what are you feeding him? I'm so confused. He's so big. Well, my mom is putting, the Gerber food, like chicken. I mean, anything. Like he was eating whatever. All the baby food, she was just putting it in with his formula. And so now at 2 months old, we're having to send him for a sleep study because he can't he can't carry that weight. It's a problem. And so, even with things like that, we can start solids 4 to 6 months of age, unless we tell you, hey, we're going to thicken baby's formula because of this reflux. But until then, 4 to 6 months of age, and even the way we introduce foods, we need to be careful. You want to make sure, because I always tell parents, 1 new food a week. Literature says 1 new food every 3 days. But for me as a parent, that's a lot for me to remember what I gave you Tuesday versus Friday. So 1 new food a week. Week 1, we start out with all, the regular rice baby food. They eat, it's great. Do not start with fruits. They are going to love sweet, and then you're going to try to get them peas, and it's going to be over. It's going to be a lost cause. So start with some vegetables. So if I give you carrots all this week, and you do fine meaning you don't break out in hives, you're not having a bunch of vomiting, et cetera, and then the next week we do sweet potato, and the next week we do peas, and the last week we do squash, and you break out in hives, it's the squash. Because we've done all these other foods for a week long at a time. So it can't be that we've been eating, peas for the last 2 weeks. It has to be the squash. And so when we go in, we're always so excited when babies eat. They're so cute. They kind of like, they're excited. We're excited. But with that, we have to make sure, again, we're being careful and being mindful that if you feed them 3 different things, it's going to be hard for me as a provider to be like, girl, I don't know which one. So now he can't have none. Now he can't have none of it. Well, now we may have to go to the allergist and do skin testing to figure out what it is. Whereas, if we would have taken our time and paced ourselves, then we're able to keep better track of things. So, even with introducing solids, you want to make sure that you're being careful. Now, if you let the baby taste the lemon, nobody's like, that's fine. That, that kind of stuff I'm not talking about, but I'm talking about us giving them full-fledged meals, and they may be allergic. We don't know what they're allergic to yet. We don't know how their digestive system will handle it.
And even when you said that, I want to give this advice to new parents. If your child is not going to be with a licensed caregiver, and they're with grandma, or normally it's grandma, all right?
Yes.
And, don't, not just baby food, but any kind of food. Please be mindful of what because often, and this is not a knock on grandma. I want to be very specific in what I'm saying. But they may not know what developmentally is going on with your child. Times change, things change. Even as a provider that has been in the field for 15 years, I have to stay abreast of what is going on developmentally with children. It's my obligation as a caregiver, right? To do that. So what I'm saying, parents, if you and your pediatrician or your pediatrician is saying this, please make sure that whomever the caregiver is, if it is grandma, that she is adhering to what the pediatrician is saying, okay? Because it's important to your child's development, okay? So it's important that you all are on one accord in regards to this, and it's not a knock. It doesn't mean that grandma doesn't have something to provide or can't care for the child, but it can't be from 40 to 50 years ago, because medically speaking and developmentally speaking, things have changed a lot. Okay. So we want to be sure and make sure that we are doing things that are for the well-being of the child. Okay.
Yes.
So when you may have this because I've, sometimes it can be a little combative.
It can
be combative.
Bring grandma to the appointment.
Exactly. Or yes, I've met grandparents.
Yeah,
and so
bring them.
But it's to bring them in. You have to think, and I this is advice for new parents as well. If they've been with grandma and you're now going to bring them into a caregiver, it can be a lonely space for grandma. They've developed a bond because we're talking about the child's development. So make sure that they have that time, and then that you're still sending pictures, and just to bring bridge the bond between the child and the caregiver, whomever that caregiver was. I still check on children that have been in my program for years, or when they leave, or I give them something to remember me by, because you got to remember we're building a bond. All right.
Yep.
So I think we've covered a lot. I hope that we've given you some great advice. I know we didn't talk about specialists, but if you're visiting your pediatrician, and if you are listening to the caregiver, and you're working alongside with us, then if a specialist is needed, that would be told to you at that time.
Yes.
So, thank you, Dr. Sharla. I appreciate you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This has been great. And the biggest thing that I tell my parents all the time, don't feel like you have to figure it all out today, right? So at the newborn visit, I just want you to keep this baby alive until 2 weeks. And then when I see you again, I'll update you, because you can be inundated with all of these messages, and everybody means well. It can be overwhelming. Enjoy your baby. Enjoy your baby. The time flies. Above all, enjoy your baby. Enjoy this time. Enjoy this space. And make sure that make sure that we have the right team in place. If grandma has questions, bring grandma to the appointment. We love and value grandma. Okay. My grandma thinks ginger ale heals all, and I listen to her. Okay. I listen to her. So we value everybody that's a part of the child's life. And so it's not segmented like early childhood development here. No, we all want to work together and be in communication. And so, we want to build a team. Let's all speak. We can have care team meetings. There's so many things that we can do. And then, but above all else, enjoy your baby, right? You brought this beautiful little human into the world. Enjoy that baby. You're doing great. I don't know who needs to hear it, but you are doing a phenomenal job.
And it may seem overwhelming, but you can do it.
Yes.
And with advice like this, and advice that you can get from your pediatrician, from your caregiver, from, early child development sites, it can be very, very insightful and helpful in what you're doing with your child, because you need it. I needed it. I know I needed it. I still need it.
I still need it too.
So, I just want to encourage you. You're doing a great job. And we, thank God for your little one.
Yep.
All right. So thank you so much again for joining us.